Hey there, everyone. How are you? So, we're going to talk about this box office for The Rise of Skywalker. It finally surpassed $1 billion worldwide, which I feel like that was almost a gimme. Although they're barely scraping by with this. The box office run is going to end very very soon here for sure. I mean, it's going to hang around in theaters for a bit still, but as far as making any substantial damage to that overall earned income throughout this entire run here, it's going to slow down significantly, and we're going to taper off here and be done pretty soon. It's barely edging out $1 billion, so it's crazy to think about this. And I see so many people talking about the fact that people just don't care about Star Wars anymore, and I don't think that's what it is. I just think people don't have trust in this trilogy anymore. The Mandalorian was a huge hit. Everybody popped off for that, and it was fantastic. I just think the trust in this trilogy, or the live action films in general, everything's been tapered off. The Force Awakens came around, and there was obviously plenty and plenty of love and buzz for Star Wars. That movie made over $2 billion worldwide by the end of its theatrical run. So there was plenty of interest there. Disney's just having a really hard time retaining that. So The Force Awakens ended at $2,068,000,000 and change. And then The Last Jedi came out, and this is where you knew that things were going to start hurting. They ended at $1,332,000,000 and change. That's a huge drop. There's a $700 million difference between the total box office from The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi. Now, I think you're to expect some drop off there, but 700 million, I mean, that's a 33% drop. That's a huge drop. And now, with all the backlash that The Last Jedi has gotten, it really shows that The Force Awakens created buzz, and it was huge buzz. The opening weekend for The Last Jedi was still massive at $220 million. That's a ridiculous opening weekend. To The Force Awakens, 247. So not a huge difference there. The problem was you didn't get all the repeat viewings, people going back and seeing it 5-6 times, or even just twice or 3 times. It was a one and done for a lot of people. And that's where you get a lot of that hurt from the box office. Solo suffered because of that. The Rise of Skywalker is definitely suffering because of that as well. Just people have lost interest in what this trilogy is presenting because there's no trust in Disney right now. And that doesn't go for everybody. The fandom is completely spread apart right now. You've got diehard fans, you've got new trilogy fans, you've got the original trilogy fans who are, riding through this. You've got the fandom menace out there. There's so many different pockets of fans now. Even when the prequels had come out, you could hate on the prequels, but still get together and talk Star Wars, and it didn't feel like you were creating enemies or what's the best way to say this? Like politics. People talk about politics, and people take such a hard stance in politics. There's just no having a cohesive conversation, regardless of how you feel about it. That's really where the fandom's kind of fallen. It's just all these extreme point of views, and people are taking their stance on it, and it's kind of a bummer that it's like that, but that's kind of where we're at right now, and The Rise of Skywalker is suffering because of that. I really enjoyed the movie. I think this trilogy is going to be really hard as far as like rewatch value down the road. Those of us who kind of grew into this Disney trilogy and have watched this thing adapt and have kind of been through all the media things and the backlash from fans again, Rian Johnson lashing out on people, Lucasfilm employees lashing out on people, all this back and forth bantering, that we've kind of been through over the years and such since Disney has taken over. It's a different experience to watch these movies now because all that goes into it. The Rise of Skywalker is an entirely different movie if The Last Jedi does not exist. The Rise of Skywalker, for me, I enjoyed it so much, really just because it took so much of what The Last Jedi did and fixed a lot of that, or sidestepped it enough to where it didn't feel like The Last Jedi completely just disrespected everything that had been set up in The Force Awakens, and just paying really just respect to Star Wars in general. I know there's a lot of Last Jedi fans out there, and that's totally cool. Everybody can, you can like what you like. There's no problem with that at all. I am not a fan of The Last Jedi. There are things in that movie that I like, but the movie as a whole, there's just so many things in there. But getting back to the box office thing here, The Rise of Skywalker, coming in just over $1 billion right now. It's awesome. These 3 movies all hit $1 billion, but the problem is that this box office is ridiculously declined. This is the end of the Skywalker saga. You're talking about the end of this trilogy and then the end of a 9-film arc. And I think the biggest issue with all of this is that there's just no trust. People want Star Wars. We just want good Star Wars. The Mandalorian is fantastic. I'm sure everybody watching this is pumped for The Mandalorian Season 2 because they got so much right with that. The problem we've got with this trilogy is that it just became such a mess where J.J. Abrams had set something up and The Last Jedi rolled around and basically just went an entirely different direction. And if that's how things had been planned out, at least there's some cohesiveness. But basically what you've got is JJ laying the groundwork for someone to take over, them saying, no, I kind of want to do it this way, and then JJ coming back in and saying, no, I kind of want to finish what I started. That's why this trilogy, 10, 15 years down the road, when you're trying to show this to your kids or the next generation, it's going to make zero sense unless you actually grew through this. Unless you were around through this, and with all the media attention and everything, with Disney taking over and watching these movies come out through theater and understanding it, these movies are going to make zero sense. When you go watch The Rise of Skywalker for the first time, if you're showing it to your kids and, like I said, 10 or 15 years from now, it's going to make zero sense. There's no cohesiveness. But because we've kind of been back and forth and we've all been debating about everything with what these movies have presented, and The Rise of Skywalker showed up and tried to do right in a sense, it's like I'm trying to think of the right word to say this. It's really just it's two people's visions just clashing against each other and just trying to get the upper hand on it. That's almost what this trilogy feels like. JJ stepped in, did his thing. Rian Johnson stepped in, said, no, I'm doing it this way, and then JJ said, no, I'm going to complete it this way. And the box office suffers because of that, because everything since The Last Jedi has been a problem. Solo was a 100% complete bomb, which that movie had a lot going against it from the get-go. But if you look at the success that The Force Awakens had, the interest and the love and the excitement, it was all there. It just has not been maintained. And that's really the biggest problem with this box office. It's nothing to celebrate that your movie just crossed $1 billion when you're Star Wars, when you're the end of this trilogy and the end of this entire saga that started back in 1977. Crossing over that billion mark, it's embarrassing that that's all you could do. Avengers Endgame shows up and puts out the highest box office total of all time, in $2.7, $2.8 billion. That's almost 3 times as much as what Rise of Skywalker is putting out. Marvel obviously is huge and hot right now, and there was a lot riding into that, but the thing is they weren't dividing fans. I know Captain Marvel had all of its things, but people were so invested into that with this arc since Iron Man that you were ready to go celebrate that movie in the theaters. And The Rise of Skywalker did not get that same kind of love. And honestly, rightfully so. Rightfully so. I do really enjoy The Rise of Skywalker. I really like The Force Awakens as well. The Last Jedi kind of ruined The Force Awakens for me for a while, because the significance that The Force Awakens put on this journey to find Luke and where they left you off, and how The Last Jedi basically told you that was 100% insignificant, it makes the entire purpose of The Force Awakens just pointless. It renders it pointless. So it really hurts The Force Awakens. If you watch The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi back to back, The Last Jedi makes The Force Awakens absolutely pointless. And I don't think, and I've seen a lot of people talk about, well, that's The Last Jedi pointing out that The Force Awakens had all these problems. I didn't realize all these problems. That's not the case at all. It's just somebody taking all these ideas that were set up and just squashing them. So now when you go back and watch that movie, it feels like it has no weight anymore, because all of it leads to nothing. Not that everything needs to be some giant, huge explanation, but there are no threads from The Force Awakens that carry through The Last Jedi. It's just sloppy. The whole thing was just sloppy. That's why I look at this as you've got JJ's Star Wars, and then you've got Disney's Star Wars. And Disney's Star Wars, to me, has had one home run, and that's Rogue One. The Last Jedi, no thank you. Solo, no thank you. But then JJ's Star Wars, which would be The Force Awakens to The Rise of Skywalker, which really just feels like it's a 1-2 punch. You can omit The Last Jedi almost entirely and still get through those 2 movies, and that feels more cohesive than what is with The Last Jedi there. With The Last Jedi being in there, that's almost the one that makes everything that out of reach. It's just all these power struggles back and forth, and it just sucks because The Rise of Skywalker almost has to be judged on that side of things. It's so hard to look at it as just like the end of this saga. It's really the fixings of The Last Jedi while trying to complete the saga. There's so much going on, and that's why the movie feels so rushed, and there's so much flying at you, which didn't bother me. That movie cruises, and there's a million things going on. It didn't bother me, because all I wanted out of that movie was to come out feeling excited, refreshed, a get the wash of The Last Jedi out of my mouth and just give me Star Wars. I just want to feel like I'm watching Star Wars, and it gave it to me. So that's what we're going to say and kind of leave it with there, guys. So yes, it made $1 billion. I don't think it's anything to celebrate. I just hope that Disney looks at this and doesn't spin this in this whole, you know, oh, well, we were wrong about what the fans wanted. You weren't. You knew what we wanted. We wanted to see these movies. We wanted to see an episode 7, 8, and 9. It's just you set everything up and then you didn't keep everybody's interest. And that's the biggest problem. So yes, please make good Star Wars. Please let other people that have creative visions get in there and make good Star Wars. And maybe the next time you want to do a trilogy, have it planned out. Have it planned out, all right? With all the issues with firing directors and firing writers and all this, it clearly shows that from the get-go there was not an initial vision with a straight line, because you were just kind of throwing, you know, crap at a wall and seeing what was going to stick, and people are paying for it with their wallets now. That's how they're responding to this whole thing. So it's a bummer. It sucks that Star Wars is in this state. I really hope the fandom can bring it back together. It's not all about these movies, all right? There is generations of Star Wars fans going back to the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy, all things in between with comics, games, books, the expanded universe, which regardless of Disney saying, well, that's all hogwash now just because they own it, doesn't matter. These are all Star Wars stories, all right? So we've all got our different love and our passion for Star Wars, and it's just, this is not right for the fandom to be in this mode just because we don't like what these new movies are. Like I said, I like The Force Awakens, I like The Rise of Skywalker, I like Rogue One, Last Jedi, and Solo. Not for me at all, but we're all fans of Star Wars, and I would just love it if we could all get along and do our thing together. It just sucks that there's all these opposing ideas, and we can't have constructive conversations. I love debating Star Wars with people, and I don't look at anybody differently. I've got close friends that really, really like The Last Jedi, and we sit there and banter about it all the time. If it gets brought up, like it just turns into a full-blown debate, but like we don't walk out of that thinking differently of each other. If we can get the fandom back on that page where we can just discuss Star Wars, that would be awesome. So that's going to leave it, guys. We're over $1 billion. I just don't think this is a victory just because it hits that mark. For this kind of a movie and everything that this movie had and what it's wrapping up, I mean, this movie should have far exceeded what The Last Jedi done. And this in comparison to what Marvel has done, again, not that you have to compare that, but we're talking about, you know, the most unbreakable brand in the history of everything that is showing that it can be broken. So that is going to do it, guys. Please subscribe to the channel, and plenty more videos on the way. It's a new channel that's going to be all Star Wars stuff on here. Appreciate you guys watching, and until next time, may the Force be with you.